everyone, welcome to Watch It Paint It. In this video, we are going to be painting up Army Painter's new exclusive Dungeons & Dragons miniature. This is from their Undead paint set, that brand new paint set that's just out for pre-order. Actually, it's not even out yet, not until November if I recall correctly. Now, this comes disassembled in the box, and it's the Undead Lich Lord, Demi-Lich, I think it is. Is it Acererak? I don't know how to pronounce it. I'll probably not try and avoid saying his name for the rest of this tutorial as well. So it comes pre-assembled. So there was an assembly video if you need that, although it was incredibly straightforward and easy to do, even without instructions in the box. They're numbered and you just do it in the numerical order, but I've got a video if you would like that. So we're going to be adding some paint, making a tutorial for this guy here. The first thing I'm going to do is prime this miniature. Now I'm going to try and stick to the sets it recommends, which is that Undead paint set that this miniature comes in, as well as the Adventurers paint set. It says you're going to probably need that to paint this up as well. So we're going to begin by priming this. In the Adventurers set, there is a grey primer. I'm going to use a spray can, Army Painter's colour primer. Where does it say what it is? This is Uniform Grey, which I think is going to be fairly similar to the paint on grey primer they provide in the Adventurers set, but it's going to be quicker to spray, and I'm using grey instead of white or black because I want to leave some of his cloak, some of this bottom bit in grey anyway. So I'm going to get that for free by shaking a can and putting it on him. I'm just making sure I mention this because some people might think it's not primed because it's going to come back and it's going to be grey, right? It's grey now, it's going to be grey in a minute, but I'm just going to go and put that primer on. So that's him all primed up. He's looking fairly similar to how he did before, but now the paint's going to stick a lot easier. I used a colour primer to save me painting some of the grey, but the first thing I noticed is that is a pretty light grey compared to the reference art. Should I grab the reference art just in case you've not got it nearby? But I feel like I'm now going to be having to paint on the Wraith black anyway, so I may as well just primed it in white. It didn't really save me anything, but you know, whatever. Sometimes grey gives you easier transitions between the recesses and the highlights, so maybe we'll go with that. I've attached it to a hobby holder, so I've got something to grip it with without getting my fingers on the paint. Not that I mind getting paint on my fingers. I thought there'd be loads on it already, but there is not. It's more that I don't want to take the paint off the miniature. So I'm going to start with some dry brushing while I've not got very much painted up, because I'm going to get this sort of everywhere. For that I'm going to use my patent pending Pringles lid as a palette, and we're going to be using some vampire garments. Got a bit of kitchen paper here to wipe off the paint from the brush, and I'm going to be using Army Painter's new Masterclass miniature dry brush. First thing I'm going to say about this is, I've mentioned it a few times, I'm really enjoying these dry brushes by the way, but this is the smallest one they've got, and it's quite big, so I'm able to do it, but I think a smaller one for when you've got to get some detailing in would be quite handy. I'm starting with this red cloak here just because I'm gonna catch so much, so I may as well do that first, and then I can touch up everything else afterwards with more accurate. Now I'm gonna not quite be dry brushing, it's more going to be like an overbrush. I want to add quite a lot of colour to it, so I'm not taking off as much as you might do when you do normal dry brushing, getting quite a lot of red on here. And the reason I'm going for this is I'm going to try and use some of that grey as like free shading. We're going to see how this looks, because I've noticed in neither of these sets there's no black wash, so I don't know how we're supposed to achieve the reference artwork without a black wash. It's interesting. I can imagine ditching this and starting again and just saying, guys, we're going to need a black wash if you want to achieve the example in the artwork. And you might not like it. I quickly googled this guy. It looks like there's plenty of different representations of how he looks. This is looking fine. It's getting red and it's getting some shading for free. You can see I've just caught some of his shoulder here, which I don't think wants to be that red. I'm certainly going to catch some of his staff as well. So that's why we're doing this first, because it's going to be incredibly difficult to do this accurately later on. So this is just going to be working this red onto these areas that's represented in the reference example, and just getting them red. Just taking my time building this up. Probably do quite a few layers just because I want it to look red with a greyish, darkish shaded area, but it definitely wants to look more red. So maybe 2 or 3 coats of this, and it should get that looking how I want. Don't worry about catching other areas. We'll touch those up as we paint them without dry brushing a bit later on. So I'm just going to go away and do this. So this is after a few coats of vampire garnets. This is how it's looking. It's got some grey recessed areas, a bit of shading in there for free. Now, I don't think it's close enough to the reference artwork, and I don't love how it's looking. Don't get me wrong, it's going to be completely fine. It's going to be on a tabletop being played. I think that's going to look like quite good shading, but I'm actually just going to start again at this point. So I'm going to be adding in some of the Bugbear brown from the Adventurers set, and I'm going to go around and paint all of this red roby area. So with our watered down Bugbear brown, we're going to be adding this basically to everywhere I've just painted red. I actually don't mind a nice thin coat with that red showing through. Now, obviously you won't have done, hopefully you won't, if you're doing this step, if you did also would like it to look more like red shading than that quick grey shading, then you're going to want to do this first so you won't have that red to go over. But for me, I'm just going to be doing it quite thin, and some of that red might poke through, and it doesn't matter because we want it to be red anyway at the end, so don't worry about how accurately I'm painting it. But if you're doing it as your base coat, just get it in all the recesses is what's important. So I'm going to go around and paint everywhere that I want to look red when I've finished. This will be for the recesses. Again, if you didn't mind the grey, just do the dry brushing step. And if you've got washers available, which I do recommend, I love the Army Painter washers, they're just not in these sets, so I'm trying to do it as though you might have only just bought this set. But if you've got the washers, you could just paint this red and use the red tone to shade this down in red, which means you wouldn't have needed to use this brown. But like I said, I'll try and stick to the sets it recommends and see what we can produce from those. So I'll just go and touch up all of this wavy cloak bit in this Bugbear brown. While I've got the Bugbear brown out, I'm also going to hit the bottom of his staff here. It looks like it's somebody's spine and a skull at the top, but up until, I think, it's hard to tell. I think I'm going to go to his hand. So up into his hand, it's wooden though. So I'm just going to catch this with some Bugbear brown while I've got the paint out on my palette. Being efficient, saving myself some dollar bills. Right, time for a little bit of deja vu. We're going to use that Vampire Garments red again, and we're going to be using Army Painter's dry brush and more or less overpainting it. So I'm not rubbing off anywhere near as much as I would if I was trying to rub off for dry brushing. I'm trying to get this bit of a scarf. He's wearing his winter scarf. I'm trying to get this looking nice and red with that brown that we just painted on as the recess, as the shaded area. I'm going to go round everywhere once again. Oh, let's hope this is the last time. And just overbrush, which is it's just dry brushing, but I'm not rubbing off loads and loads. I'm just taking off the bulk of the red, and I'm just going to go around and probably do again 2, maybe 3 passes at this to bring this scarf up to a red colour, just leaving the brown in the deepest recesses as shade really. Again, if you've got plenty of Army Painted shades, so you could just paint this in the red and then use the red tone to darken it down. If you want a darker, dingier look, use some of the brown washers, the deep tone, that sort of thing. So be back once this is looking more red. I really like how that's starting to look now. This brown's looking a lot more realistically like the shade for this red, and it was still relatively quick to do. I'm going to highlight up the red another step, and for that I'm going to use the Adventurers set Dragonfire Red. Now, I noticed I've not used that in ages, so taking up the paint's taken a while. It reminded me that I've got the Army Painter mixing balls. Just drop one of those in the paint and it makes it a little bit easier when you're shaking it up, and it's quite therapeutic. I do always enjoy dipping my balls in the paint, and if nothing else it gets to add this nice satisfying noise as you're shaking it up for 6 weeks. So I'm just going to get that shaken up. I'm just taking the lid off to put the balls in, and I've got loads all over my kitchen paper, so I'm just going to use that for the paint to dry brush from, and you can do that instead of putting it on a palette. Just stick it straight on the kitchen paper. Oops, oh yeah, that's the right one. I thought I just got the wrong one then. You can see this is a lot more vibrant, this red. A lot brighter, so it's going to work nicely as a final highlight. For this time, it's not going to be so much over brushing. I'm going to be going for dry brushing, so I'm going to make sure I get a lot more of that paint off. I didn't clean my brush after using the darker red, which is fine because I don't mind it helping transition a little bit, but I'm just going to do it twice to make sure I've got more of this brighter red on it. So once we've got that down to next to no paint on it, I'm going to very, very lightly go around, just trying to catch the very top parts of this scarf for him, just giving him a little bit more depth to this colour. For the next bit, I was going to go and deal with the elephant in the room, which is the artwork showing purple, and neither of these kits having purple in them and being quite hard to mix. Purple's actually a difficult one to get, especially in vibrant versions, which is kind of what I would like. So I'm going to paint this in purple, and as you can see, I had a bit of a field day, even trying to mix a colour I would like, trying out basically different combinations of the red, the light blue, this pinky ethereal spectre. And then what I realised is Wraith Black is not like Necromancer Cloak at all. Very cool. It's very, very dark blue. It's very different to what I imagined. So using this, and I think my preference is a splash of red is what I'm going to go for. Sort of 2/3 this, 1/3 red is giving me a purple. I think it was this one I appreciate. It was certainly the one that I'm going to use, and you can mix up different ones if you want, or, you know, it's really hard for me to resist knowing I've got Alien Purple right next to me. If you have this available, you're going to save yourself any bother, or just don't paint it purple. Just don't do it purple. It could be any colour, right? I certainly considered that, but I like a challenge. I thought I'd give it a go, so I'll mix up some of that paint. So yeah, if I recall correctly, 1-2 dollops of this Wraith Black, and then we'll have one little dollop. Oh, that was quite a big dollop, so I might need some more. Couldn't control that. That's the Vampire Garments. Let's mix that together. Bit too red for my liking, so let's just splash in a bit more the Wraith Black. And there we go, something like this. It's very muted though, isn't it? But it'll do, Pig, it'll do, especially for the base coat. And then we're just going to be working out where his top robe is. I did not make enough paint, and that is one of the public's concerns, or one of the problems with mixing paints up, is that you might run out and then you've got to remake it. 1, 2, but it's just not something to worry about. It doesn't even matter if this colour doesn't match the one I just made. It just wants to be close enough, and you're not really going to notice. And if you need to paint over the same bit, and you can notice it there, just paint over the whole thing again. Just make this new colour the colour. So you can see this isn't quite right. Mixing it right next to it is helpful. I can see I need a tiny bit more red, except I think I prefer this colour. This looked more dark, like a dark purple now. But you can see I've just put a little bit on top. Or, more to the point, can you see it? Because I don't think you can tell the difference. Oh yes, you see it's just ever so slightly in the right light. So again, this bit was actually done, so I didn't need to do that. And it's still wet, so I can just blend this in anyway. And it's just not going to matter. You're not going to know. So I just paint it back over the top of that. And then, obviously I've made much more than this time, so that's not going to be a problem. Then I work out anywhere else I want to paint, which I think I'm going to decide he's wearing like an undergarment, which means this top bit should all be purple. Yeah, I know personally when I started painting, and even to this day, to some extent, mixing colours, to me it's more of an effort, right? I just had to work out which purple to do, but normally if you want something lighter, that's dead easy to do. But there was this fear about mixing paints, and it was, for me personally, you have to let me know in the comments below, it was about ever like mixing that same colour, or having to keep mixing that same colour as you paint up a miniature, and thinking, oh, it'll never be the same, so it'll look awful. But it just does not matter. Even if it doesn't look the same and it's in a slightly different place, you're just not really going to notice, as long as it's reasonably close, which is always easy-ish to do. then it's a non-issue. And if you really are concerned, just write down your measurements. Always do it in drips or parts. So you move them over with the brush. So 1 part X, 2 parts Y. Do it like that so it's nice and easy to remember. And then, yeah, just write it down somewhere on an app on your phone, on a piece of note paper, whatever. But personally, I don't bother. YOLO in it, but it's never really come up. Maybe it's because the miniatures I paint are small and I paint fast, and I tend to do it all in one go as well. I'm not having to remember over multiple weeks what I did. Yeah, if I had to do that, especially with this, like, ask me what colours I mixed together in 2 weeks' time for this, and good luck with me ever remembering it. We saw how many. I tried a lot to get a colour that I was happy with. This is nice. I'm enjoying that. That's the purple base coat that I want. So I'll just work out if there's anywhere else and tidy that up. So not too much more. I missed his arm up here, and I've got some of his sleeves poking through at the end of his arm. So that's all the purple done. I'm going to highlight up the purple next, and for that I'm going to mix in a little bit of bleach skull, just lightening down this purple here. So let's put it to one side so I can mix in little bits at a time, because I'm not quite sure how light I'm going to want to go or in what stages. So let's grab 1 dollop and let's just mix this in. It should make it a bit paler. There we go. So certainly take a little bit less as you do your steps. I'd forgot there wasn't much paint here, so that little blob was actually quite a big blob. I'm going to try this out though and see how it looks. It's very lilac-y, isn't it? So for this I'm going to go down a size in brush, and I'm just going to almost be dry brushing this on, but I want some accuracy. So I'm going to be painting this on all of the raised parts of this cloak. Yeah, I need less on this brush, so I'm almost dry brushing it. I'm going to edge highlight along, so I'm using the side of my brush and very lightly catching those raised parts of this cloak. It's a very poppy highlight. As I mentioned, maybe a bit too much white, but I actually like it. I think it's good. It's getting straight to the point. It's going to make this miniature quite quick to paint up, and it makes it a lot more noticeable, especially because I'm going to paint the darker grey in a minute, and it does want to stand out from that. Finished highlighting up the purple. Now I think it's a little bit lighter than I wanted. It's a bit more like a pale blue on top of a purple. It looks fine in itself. It's just not quite as close to the artwork as I was going for. Like I said, I think I'd just pick up a alien purple. Purple's a pain to mix because so many blues are actually green based, and reds, can reds be green based? Something like that. And when you try and mix them together, it doesn't do the blue and green mixed like you actually want. So it's painful. So I would go for I'd get myself a purple. There's probably one in one of the kits, just not the two it said you could paint this model up from. Or it didn't actually say you could paint this model up. I shouldn't say that. It said it recommended the adventure kit and this undead kit. This is going to be close to purple, isn't it? Look at that. This Wraith Black is a very dark purple. So with that in mind, this is the Wraith. It's the Wraith Black. It's purple. Once it's applied to this grey, it's really clear. I think I wouldn't even have mixed up. Well, I mean, it didn't hurt to put a little splash of red in there. It gives it more of a purpley vibe, I think. But you could just get away, I think. Oh, this video is just going to be me backtracking the whole way through as I work out how to do this. But yeah, I think I would just paint that with Wraith Black. It's a really dark purple. It's not very vibrant, but that is purple. So you can save yourself. You can mix in a bit of red if you want, but like I did, and you get more of like this tone. Or you could just use this and it's a dark purple. So with that in mind, I'm going to use black for this part of his cloak, just to give a contrasting difference. So I'll find that Abysmal Black from the Adventurers set. So purely so these colours have some differentiation between them, I've grabbed some Abyssal Black. Is it Abyssal or Abysmal? One of the two. And I will paint the remainder of this bottom layer of his clothing in black. I think I'll also do all of his base while I'm here, and I'll just highlight that up in grey as well. That's a much bigger contrast to that purple now. So yeah, Wraith Black, who knew, was just dark purple. Not the purple I think it's in the artwork. Still think that's more like alien, but look at that. Looks a lot more purple against black, doesn't it? I will mention, if I was using my full range of colours here, I would actually paint all all of the remaining robe in Necromancer Cloak. That's a very dark grey. That gives a lot more room to tone it down and bring it back up black. I can't go more black than black, so this is going to be more work to get looking amazing. Necromancer Cloak, I would just Necromancer Cloak this. What's the black wash called? Dark tone. I would then dark tone, that will go in the recesses, make that look black, and then a quick dry brush highlight on that would make that look like black, but with varying shades of it, whereas this is, I'm only going to be able to work up from here. It's going to look fine. It's not as quick, easy, or as good as using Necromancer Cloak. Could have mixed that up myself. Maybe I should have done. I'm still having nightmares about mixing that purple to find out when it's on the miniature, it looks so much like purple. Anyway, back once this is dry. So now that's black's all dry, we're going to work on highlighting that up. So we're going to use some ghoul grey, and I'm not going to jump straight up to that because that, as poppy as I like things, that's too poppy for me. So we're going to use some of this black and just mix that into the grey and darken this down. So the reason I'm moving between edge highlighting and dry brushing is just how much room I've got to do the miniature. I'd much rather dry brush, it's quicker and it gets the look that I want. But when it's too close to bits I've already painted, it's making me not want to do that. So again, I am dry brushing medium at this rate, so it's a bit over brushy. I've got more paint on it than I would normally have for dry brushing. That's just because I want quite a deep layer of this darker grey, because I'm going to add an extra layer of highlight. So I'm pushing down reasonably hard, and I've got more paint on than I would for dry brushing. And that's just going to go a little bit into the recesses. I'm not pushing deep, and it's not got so much paint it goes into the recesses, but I'm pushing enough that it's getting the highlights plus a bit of the recess, but not all the way in. Never go all the way in. It's better to tease the paint on the edges, and everyone's going to have a better time that way. I'm also going to do the same with the base below. He's stood on some dungeony tiles. I'm going to have to paint the rim back in black, but that won't take a second. It's a lovely little textured base. You can't see much of it, but it's enough. Something like that. I'm going to grab a little bit more ghoul grey, and this is just going to do a very bright final highlight. So this time, in fact, I'm going to make sure, I've not washed this brush by the way, I'm going to put some more of this medium grey on it, and that's because I don't want it to be super. There we go, that's just mixing it down just a little bit, because that was going to be a super bright poppy highlight, and I don't know if I quite want that. Although I'm a fan of poppy highlights. It's not amazing when you're up super close to a miniature, but we're game players, right? These are on the tabletop at a distance. It's nice to have some pop to it so you can really see the highlights standing out. Now this time I am dry brushing, very little on the brush, very lightly applying it. I just want the very most raised parts, the very edge of each of these folds, the very points of the tail of his dress. As I mentioned, black, you just giving it a base of black doesn't give you much room to work with. I can't go down from it, so I've only been going up. It's getting brighter and brighter grey. It's still going to look great, but just using that Necromancer Cloak approach gives you both ways to go with the colour. Say Necromancer Cloak one more time. A day, a double day, and then once again just kind of stippling it, catching a few of these tiles on the base. It's maybe a bit bland given his cloak is the same colour, but it's only a tiny bit that you can see anyway. So I'm going to be using another colour from the Adventurous set. This is that Flump Pink, and that's really just a skin tone, and I'm going to be using this instead of a wash. Now if I had all the washes I would normally use available, I would be washing this up, but I'm going to use this colour as the sort of shade to this bony part of the stave. Stave? Do you say stave, or is that when it's plural? The staff. I'm going to use this as the shadows, so I'm going to cover that entirely with this. There are some straps. I'm not going to mind too much if I catch them. I'll paint them up after I've done the bone staff. While I'm waiting for the flesh to dry on the staff, I am going to mix in about 50-50 with some bugbear brown, and that's just going to be for some edge highlighting down the side of the wooden part, just giving that some colour. Just trying to catch all of the raised bits. It's got a lot of grain, I guess, in this wood. And we get to dry brush again. Super easy mode engaged. Also, I've got blue all over my dry brush. What? Careful where you leave your dry brush sitting. Don't leave it in some blue paint. So we'll grab a load of white on here. Can you get black kitchen paper? It's kind of hard to see if I rubbed it all off. Let's rub it off on the red, because I do want to dry brush this on. And you can see the flesh colour is a little bit patchy, but that's fine. I heavily watered it down. I don't know if I mentioned that at the time. And it's mainly because I just wanted it to run into the recesses. I don't mind it coming off of all these raised bits, because a little bit hard to get near his hand because his robes are there. And I already painted them. The ordering and doing this with the amount of dry brushing I'm going for is very, very important. Basically that, I'm going to get it closer to my face to go close to his hand, and then as many coats as you want to get it as bright as you need, but that flesh is doing a nice job of toning it down in the recesses for me. That stuff's looking nice and bright how I wanted it, so I'm going to paint on this strap that's across the skull holding it together. Bugbear brown back out for this, and I'll just go around here. I notice it's got another 2 points here, and I thought they were straps, but now I've dry brushed them and I can see what's going on. They actually look more like kind of like braces, necklaces, bracelets, something like that. So I'm going to paint them metallic, and that'll just spice it up a little bit. But yeah, this strap will be a nice leathery, ropey strap around the top of the skull. I'm going to move on to the skin, if you could call it skin next, and for that I'm going to use the cold flesh that's in the new set. I can't quite tell what it is in the example artwork, but it looks a bit grey, a bit like this, and I want to take this for a spin and see how it looks. So I'm just going to painstakingly paint on all of his fingers, avoiding any of the recesses between them as best I can, and leaving the original, finally, the grey primer I did is going to come into play. There we go, look at that, that hand's popping right out. That grey primer's finally going to come into play. Yeah, it was a bit of a miss, but you know, it's quite exciting. Setting myself a challenge using very specific paints makes it interesting. Hopefully it's a bit different seeing me almost struggle my way through, mainly because of the limit, not because of the paints. If I use my whole collection, and well, it's the limits of trying to copy that artwork, isn't it? A little bit tricksy. But oh, this is a lovely colour. His face isn't this bright in the example though. Boop to snoop. I think I might try and dry brush that on, because I've not painted anywhere around it, and that just might make his features pop out. I do think dry brushing just the face is going to be very, very difficult. Just make sure my dry brush isn't wet. It is wet. Make sure your dry brush isn't wet if you're going to attempt this. Maybe I should just get a smaller dry brush. No, let's use this one. Have a little faith, baby. This time I definitely want to dry brush. I really want, look how much is still coming off. I want next to nothing. I want to have to press quite firmly, and I don't want it to go in any of the recesses of his face, because I really just want to pop out those amazingly small but beautiful details on his face. Just like so. Is it coming out on camera? It's just visible in person. It's going to take a few slow and steady coats, I think. Oh, it is popping out very, very slow. So I'll work this up lots and lots of times. It's going to go everywhere, but it doesn't matter. I'm painting all the rest of his face. I just want to avoid any of the robes that I've done. I just want to do this slowly. I don't want to accidentally get too much paint on it. So I've just finished off his face off camera, and I like where that's gone. It's not that similar to the artwork. It's a lot darker in the artwork. I'm not quite sure which colour they've used, but I like where that's gone. I've not painted that colour flesh. I'm trying to try out a lot of these new colours so I can see what they're like, and whew, I like that colour. So let's paint some metallics. We have silver available to us in the adventure set, but it's got to be all about Cursed Blade. I think all these colours may well be unique. I mentioned that in the unboxing video, that it says they're unique, and normally they're not all unique, but I'm not familiar with this colour of kind of like gold. It's like an antique-y gold. So I'm going to use as much of this as I can. I'm going to paint more than is in the example piece, because I think this is maybe in silver in the example piece, but I just want to make him more uniform. He wants a gold shoulder piece and a gold helmet as well, although I am going to struggle. How can I highlight this? I'm going to have to mix silver in, aren't I? Because I'm going to say there's only this and silver available to me in these two sets. But yeah, that's fine. We'll mix a bit of silver in to shine this up. So I'm going to go around. Again, if I had washes available, I'd probably use something like a flesh wash. I can see why it might be better to use 2 shades of metallics, because it reaches up at the back. I was thinking at the front it's not that close. Also, what are these side bits on the artwork? They're different to this gold on top, aren't they? Interesting. Yeah, I might make that separation myself as well to give a bit of a gap between his shoulder and his helmet, which will look infinitely better if they're not touching. This is a very cool colour. I don't think I'd use it often, but it's a very, very nice colour. I'll finish off this helmet. I'll get these horns as well. Finish off the shoulder part. And then, as I mentioned when I was doing the staff, there are these 2 sort of bracelets, one here and one here, which I'm also going to do in this gold look. Well, I'm loving how that new metallic looks. Not quite sure how I'm going to shade it yet, given that I've only got one wash. I'm going to use some mithril silver from the Adventurers set, the only other metallic we've got in these 2 sets, and that's just to paint in these kind of chains that he's got going down to this dead head necklace that he's wearing. So I'll be a bit generous in here, because I am gonna try that one wash. Is it moldy wash? Did it say mold wash? Something like that. It looks like a green wash. It looks like green tone, but as I'm finding out, some of these colours are super surprising. So we'll give that a try, and we'll use that as the wash to pop out these metallics, as well as this big baller medallion thing chain that I'm painting in this silver. I'm going to do this other bit of his helmet too, and that's going to separate out these 2 metallics, and I think it makes it look a lot better. It may well have been this colour in the artwork. It's a very difficult picture to see, but yeah, we'll make the rest of his helmet metallic, but using the other metallic available to us. Very, very clever there. So that's green painted on. Did a little bonus bit. It's in his eyes. I think that's a little bit of detail. It's quite hard to do, quite small. I did more of the eyeball than actually is, but I'm going to try and treat it a bit like a glowing effect. I also started the glowing effect off on that gem on the top, just painted the edge there. I'm not going to put too much time and effort into the glow, but it'll give a small one for free for me. So that's green done. So that's the model completely painted, and it's time to find out what the moldy wash looks like. I think just a green wash, but we'll find out. I'm going to use my smaller brush, and I'm going to try and apply this quite carefully, because I want it in his eyes for one. So just a little dot where I did the green eyeball. Just a smidge. There we go. That should run off the actual eyeball itself. So I'm in this eye socket here, like so. Just a small little dab, and then again, even my small brush is maybe getting too much wash, but just a little bit on his tongue there. Hopefully sit between his mouth and his tongue, and then we'll do the face down here. It's just like a dark green wash. Be interesting how it dries, but it looks like very similar to green tone. I mean, there might be a slight difference. There's a slight difference with Horde Shade and Plague Shader, but not enough that it matters on a day-to-day basis, but it is what it is. And then we'll just go for a bigger brush, just to apply this green wash all over, because it's the only one I've got available to me using these 2 sets. I'd probably be tempted to use a flesh wash if I had one available. And that's just to do all of these metallics. And then I'll leave this to dry for some time, and we'll come back and just highlight these up. These metallics, this detailing, and it's beautiful. It's really gonna look amazing, even if green's maybe not the best colour for the wash. I don't know, it could be though. Looks very undead, doesn't it? A bit ethereal, a bit old and mouldy. But yeah, it's certainly the detail work on that's going to bring that out and look amazing. So that's that wash, nicely dried. I do think it's a bit of a green tone, nothing super noticeably different, but it looks good, looks nice. I like what it's done to the metallics. That's really interesting with this paint set and this kind of challenge that I've arbitrarily set myself, that is making me do things I wouldn't normally have done, right? And from that, I get to see what green looks like with this cursed blade, and it's nice. So I'm just going to highlight it up just ever so slightly, just put some colour back to the very, very most raised parts of this cursed blade. I think actually it's kind of like, can you see how shiny that is? I've not highlighted that bit yet, and I think it's kind of fine to some degree. Maybe don't even bother unless you need to. I'm certainly being more cautious here. I'd rather get none on than too much, because I think it's already looking great. But yeah, essentially I'm just edge highlighting some of this cursed blade back on, just to like these points here in his armor, just giving it a bit more of a shine on the very tips and maybe down the edge here, which is just where you think it needs it. And to be honest, you could just skip it. It looked absolutely fantastic, I think, just with that wash added. I will catch each of the point of his hat, and I would be tempted, like, by all means try this out. I think mixing in some of the mithril silver would give you a nice, slightly shinier, slightly brighter highlight if you wanted to go down that route. I honestly, to me, this looks like a really nice colour, nice kind of tarnished looking vintage antique gold, and I'm pretty happy with that, to be honest. So I'm not going out of my way to overly highlight this. I think something like that will do. As for the highlights on the mithril silver, I had to bring it close to my face to even see what I wanted to do, and it was very little. I just added a little dab on the ends of this helmet that did silver. And the other thing I wanted to mention is, I didn't notice, but he's wearing sort of like armor just here, these ridges, and I left it as the primed grey, applied the wash so it's got that mouldy wash on it, and then I've just sort of dry brush scraped some silver onto it, and that's given the effect that he was wearing some sort of silver armor around there, which you can just see on the sides and the back. So just finishes off that bit for the miniature for me. For me, I think I just want to do one final step, which is just bringing out the glow in that green that I put on. So I'll just repaint in this gem just here and a little bit down here. I don't even know if I care about making it look like it's glowing, or just make it a little bit green because it's interesting. I think, I'll do a little bit on this face. Off camera, I'll go and get a tiny bit more just to brighten up his eyes. And then I think I'm going to try out one more colour from the set, just to try and highlight these areas up. That ethereal spectre, is it? I'll have to have a double check what the name is once I've finished this. So yeah, I'll just get a bit closer with this green off camera, and then we'll be back for the final bit. Well, I just completely made up that colour. Ghostly vapours, this ethereal spectre, whatever, ghost and ethereal, right? Similar. I just realised I say I'll come back to do it. I'm not going to be able to. I'm going to go and get my smallest brush, and I'm going to take some ghostly vapours, and I'm going to get in and just do the very centre of his eyes, and the very centre of this green up here. And that's all I'm going to touch up with that, but I'm going to have to get this close to my face. Guys, pro tip, if you're short-sighted like myself, take your glasses off when you're trying to paint really close detail. Your short-sightedness is actually going to help, and it's going to make it zoom in for you if you don't have magnifying glasses. I mean, to some extent, I question whether it's just easier for me without magnification glasses and just without my normal ones on, but it's just a tip if you didn't realise that works. Back once I've added a bit of ghostly vapours. Oh, look at that, guys. So I've added a little bit of ghostly vapours. I don't love how it looks on his helmet. I don't think I really made that glow or added much to it. I think I preferred the original green. But look at his eyes. Wow, they're haunting, aren't they? They're terrifying. What a great little touch that was. Really, I just want to try out another colour from this set and see how I felt about it. And I was impressed. Been impressed with a lot of the colours in this set, painting this guy up. And with that, that is him, completely old matey boy, what's his face, whatever his name was, completely finished, guys. That model was an absolute blast. Loved painting that. Loved that I set myself this randomly difficult challenge sticking to the 2 sets of paints that they recommended. And I think the achievement is not perfect. It's not perfect to the reference artwork, but it's close and it looks good anyway. And totally, if you are just using those paint sets, just mix it up. If you don't like the purple, chuck in a different colour. Use one of the other ones. Blue would have worked equally nicely. I don't think you have to stick to that random reference paint job that they've got. Also, just grab alien purple for the highlights if you want to do that. That's the only thing I would say. Other than that, the paints were great. I absolutely love this cursed blade. Wow. And the ghostly vapors as well. That took me by surprise. Didn't use it on much, but it's really, really nice just to be able to have that colour and get those scary eyes. So yeah, I enjoyed the model, enjoyed the paint job, and enjoyed the paint sets that I limited myself to. Guys, you watched it. Now go and paint it. I will see you again next week. Lich Lord. I don't even know if I pronounced Lich right, and I certainly can't pronounce words. That's what I can't pronounce.